Greetings, everybody. Good to be with you. This is the first time I've actually spoken at ICMI, though I have been lucky enough to have been invited several times. In the past, I've always felt that I had nothing new to say to add to what I have many times written over the last 30 years. If anybody's interested to know what I think, they only have to look up my book Sexual Impolitics, which was published in 2014, which is an anthology of many of my published works on sex, gender, men, and feminism. That book contains pretty much everything, I think. But now, today, I actually have got something new to offer to ICMI. In talking about the Scottish Family Party, I want to introduce to you a whole new world of political possibility in tackling the disadvantages and inequalities of men and, let's hope, of running political rings around the feminist boss class. To my mind, the Scottish Family Party represents the most exciting and encouraging political development in the last 30 years that I've been concerned about the position of men and attacking the feminist establishment. Up until now, I've always been absolutely certain that there was no chance of finding political representation for the problems which men actually do face in education, in employment, in family law and life, because those concerns simply don't lie within that narrow Overton window which defines the range of policies that are politically acceptable to the mainstream population at any given time. This has been unmistakably evident for more than 30 years. One of the most vivid examples, to my mind, came when a delegation from Families Need Fathers went to meet Paul Boateng when he was Minister of State at the Home Office in the late 1990s. And he angrily dismissed their representation, saying, "I don't want to hear a word about any disadvantages for fathers until every inequality for women has been eradicated." Unquote. The fact that this is no more logical than saying, "I don't want to hear a word about any disadvantages for Welsh people until every disadvantage for Scots has been eradicated," or "I don't want to hear a word about the difficulties of growing apples until all the difficulties of selling oranges have been eradicated," would not have crossed the arrogant, self-righteous mind of that minister. If, however, you go back to my 1992 book, No More Sex War, you'll find that even 30 years ago, I was saying very definitely that the social and political interests of males need to be addressed in tandem with the interests of females. I actually wrote, quotes, "We need binocular vision rather than the monocular squint which feminism has given us. We need to accommodate the twin recognitions that men may be subjected to specific and general disadvantages of their own, and that those disadvantages and the specific and general disadvantages of women may be relieved only if we can recognize that their interests are complementary, mutual, and inseparable." Unquote. Those have been my guiding principles for 30 years, and for 30 years I have been trying to find a form of political expression for them. For all those decades, that problem was completely beyond my powers. I couldn't remotely see a solution. Then, about 6 or 7 years ago, I started realizing that a political focus on the interests of the family could provide a vehicle to treat the interests of men and boys as being of the same value as the interests of girls and women. It could provide an umbrella over all of those concerns so many of us are in families, and so many of us want to be in families, that the interests of family can be said to include the interests of the majority instead of the fractional minority which feminism actually represents. Thus it was that I started working up the idea for the family union. This would be the first new union of the 21st century, with branches in all places of work and all social institutions such as schools and colleges, but one which represents the interests of all the people in families, rather than people who share a craft, a trade, or an occupation. To my mind, this plan has the potential to shift the political and social balance of our time in favour of ordinary people. It would outflank the feminist orthodoxy, and it would genuinely be a vehicle through which the interests and the disadvantages of boys and men can be raised and addressed. I actually have got some way with developing the family union, and I am going to make it happen before I die. I have devised and designed a website and lined up a lot of contributors, but last spring I got derailed in those efforts by agreeing to be chairman of the Scottish Family Party and agreeing to work full-time to support their efforts towards the Scottish elections in 2021. I should add, I've lived in Scotland for over 20 years. The Scottish Family Party is not only the first political party I've joined for 40 years, it's the first time in my life that I can genuinely vote with enthusiasm for a party with whose policies I agree to about 95%. So for those of you who don't know, what is the Scottish Family Party? Well, it's actually easier in the first place to say what it isn't. It isn't woke, it isn't right on, it certainly is not feminist, it isn't nationalist, it isn't left, it isn't right. It shuns and avoids all those conventional categorizations. Naturally, if you say you're not woke, the wokeists automatically scream that you must be right-wing or far-right. Speaking for myself, I'm now able to prove that isn't true of me because the Political Compass, if you know that invaluable app, shows that my overall political position is fractionally to the left of centre by about 1 graph square and fractionally more towards libertarianism than authoritarianism, again by about 1 graph square. We all know that proof, reason, evidence simply don't come into it when the SJWs decide that you're far right. But it's quite handy to be able to produce objective diagrammatic certainty which shows exactly where you do stand. Yet, despite being far from right-wing, I have found a home, a political home, in the Scottish Family Party. How? Why? What does the Scottish Family Party stand for? Well, we stand, of course, naturally for sexual equality. Who doesn't? And especially for the equality of fathers in the family courts, which makes us rather unusual. We stand for what those wokeists sneeringly call heteronormativity. So we stand for the provable truth that children, women and men are, by all measures, happier, better off and more successful in stable heterosexual marriages than in any other setup. We stand for the sex of a baby as it is recorded at birth, remaining the sex of that person for all legal purposes until death. We stand for the unborn. We stand for supporting families who look after their own old people. We stand for real education rather than brainwashing propaganda, and for homeschooling rather than battery farming in nurseries. As an unashamedly populist party, we stand for the people having the deciding voice over all legislation. Look up our policies at scottishfamily.org. I think you'll find that they're the best you've ever seen. And guess what? The Scottish Family Party might actually stand a chance of getting 1 or 2 MSPs elected to the Holyrood Parliament in next year's Scottish elections. Under the regional list system for Holyrood elections, an element of proportional representation makes it possible for minority parties to gain seats in that parliament. You only need to get about 6% of the votes overall to achieve a significant number of MSPs. Trouble is, of course, that 6% of the votes is almost as massive a target as 60% for us, a party that only started in 2017 as the brainchild of its founder and leader, Richard Lucas. And it's an especially difficult task for a party which has been actually blacked out by orthodox media in Scotland. We literally cannot get a line of coverage for our policies, for our campaigns, for our activities, or for the evidence which we can show that the majority share the same views as we do. So, the Scottish Family Party has no option but to work through social media, through personal connection, through the underground. And we need you to follow us, please, on Twitter and Facebook, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please to resend and retweet our messages to all your followers. That's the way we'll grow. That's the way we'll get that 6% we need. So please get behind us. We need your support. Scotland needs you, and men and boys need you too. Please see the links below. Thanks a lot. Have a great conference, everyone. Venturemos!